So this week, I just want to start off by addressing, obviously, the tragedy um, that this week's album doesn't have a cover. I can't explain it. I don't know what happened to the cover. Sometimes tragedies will happen, and we can't understand it. Why God does these things. We just have to deal with it and move on. This was really a tremendous cover too, but thank God that I still have this album, which is, of course, B1000 by Guided by Voices. It's a classic. This is really their first classic. 94, I think this is. So, Guided by Voices, I think we should just talk first about music in general. If you want to make a name for yourself in music and develop a following and develop a buzz, you have to have a bit of a gimmick. You have to have some credibility. You have to have marketability. And, it's obvious how it's done in pop music. These broads who dance around and show their ass, or, the rappers that have their way of doing it, country guys who write a song about 9/11, or et cetera, et cetera. And indie rock, they might think, they're above that. Oh, we're about the music. Nah, not so much. I'm an indie rock guy, but I admit, in indie rock, you also have to have a marketing gimmick to some degree. Not that it's a gimmick, but that you have to have some unique thing to offer specifically to your audience. And that's what Guided by Voices had when they first popped with this album. And their gimmick was they're older guys. They were in their late 30s, I think, at this point. And Robert Pollard, the leader, the main songwriter and singer, was a fourth grade teacher. And these are guys who they're from Ohio, and they just jam tunes in the basement on weekends after school, and got drunk and recorded them real shitty. And purposely, they sound like just the tape recorders in the corner under a blanket, and they're just blasting away. But the songs are genius somehow. That's the buzz on the band. Now, for indie rock people, you hear that, you go, oh, okay, I'm interested in that. Because to appeal to an indie rock crowd, you have to have a little bit of a weirdness thing. I mean, this is the era of, like, Wesley Willis, who was a big goofy dude who just played keyboard presets. Or Daniel Johnston, who was a very goofy dude who legitimately wrote brilliant songs. But let's not pretend in indie rock that we're not above marketing. And the other thing about Guided by Voices indie rock-wise is I've sort of soured a little bit on a lot of indie music because so much of it is like just nerdy. I'm just going to say nerdy. That it's like a bunch of dudes, like slackers, sort of kids who just, stare down at the floor and, play the noise rock and write these ironic and sort of semi-absurd lyrics. And there's no swagger. I mean, at this point, I'd rather listen to Van Halen than most indie rock bands. Guided by Voices, even though they're older guys at this point, guy's a fourth grade teacher, they had some of that rock spirit, that Van Halen. And speaking of that, the other thing that I really hate with bands is when you see a picture of a band, like for a magazine, and like the lead singer is a little bit in front, like especially when it's supposed to be a serious band. Like, I understand if David Lee Roth has to be in the front, but when you see a picture of like Coldplay, who are hideous human beings and a hideous band, and that fucking guy is like, a little bit ahead of the other guys in the picture. Fuck you. Fuck you. So, anyway, Guided by Voices is... Robert Pollard, I will say, is one of the most prolific songwriters, artists that you will ever be cursed enough to follow. Because the guy, literally, since this album, a little bit before, but especially since this one, when they popped, he'll put out, seriously, 8 albums a year. He continues to this day. I think 2017, he's probably up to 5 or 6. Since 2010, he's probably put out 30 albums. Maybe not that many. 25 is a reasonable number of his different bands, his solo albums. I know 2012, 2013, Guided by Voices got back together and put out like 3 albums one year, 2 albums the second year. Pollard had like 2 solo albums. He's got like side projects of Brown Spaceships and all these different bands. It's all pretty much the same, and it's all him. And he writes he writes so much material that there's a lot of shit in what he writes. There's a lot of goofy stuff. It's very lo-fi. But he has a way of sometimes writing these classic pop songs in an indie rock way that just get in your head, and they're just songs that are like, they're meant to be songs. They're meant to be classic songs, if that makes sense. They're just, certain great songs are just meant to be. And Pollard has written a zillion of those. And the problem is, a lot of times he'll bury them on an album of all kinds of crazy shit. Guided by Voices this year just put out a new album. And it's not all the same guys, but it's one of the better ones they've done. But even on that album, he'll put out a great song and then like some weird shit that's just purposely like off-key and just some drunken yarbling. And, you know, you just have to put up with it. But B1000 has an uncommonly high percentage of great tunes. Maybe not as great as the next one that followed, is called Alien Lanes, is maybe the best one they ever did. But this one, you know, Hardcore UFO, I remember putting this on and hearing the buzz and saying, okay, let me see what these clowns are all about. And it hooked me right away. Tractor Rape Chain, Buzzards and Dreadful Crows is one of my favorites on this side. And it's also, let's note that Pollard designs all his own covers and all his artwork, and this is just an example of what, there's a site called, I think it's GBVDB, the Guided by Voices database. You can just take a look at all the EPs and singles and albums he's put out and all the weird art. This guy's got a really cool, weird sensibility that his art is always odd, and it's just really it's unique, just like his music. But I like his lyrics too. It's sort of snatches of poetry, but again, Buzzards and Dreadful Crows is probably the banger from this side. That, I don't know, what is it about? The lifeblood, the lighthouse flashing, 16 chicks remain on watch for the reels to come rolling in, and they do. They always do. We'd be bored and disappointed if they didn't. Buzzards and dreadful crows right on the tip of my nose. They wait like cats and fly out for the light in my eyes to die out, and it does. Yes, it always does. I'd be shocked and removed if it didn't. Buzzards and crows, a necessary evil, I suppose. There's something in this deal for everyone. Did you really think that you were the only one? What's that song about? You know, I'd say it's about, there's a lot of nonsense that goes on in the world, a lot of shit you can't change, and a lot of liars, thieves, scumbags, and good people, who knows? The buzzards and dreadful crows are always going to be there, a necessary evil, I suppose. but there's something in the deal for everyone. Do you really think you were the only one? I'm sorry, I think that song actually makes sense to me. And again, so it's fringe indie rock, but there's something deeper there. And let's also note that the other guy who wrote with Pollard is called Tobin Sprout and has some great tunes on here. Awful Bliss is one of his classics. I think the album before on here, he has a song called 14 Cheerleader Cold Front, which is great. Most of his songs are like a minute and a half, but he's a little more pop. It's another thing about Guided by Voices is, I probably should have said earlier, one of their trips is they'll write tons of songs, and a lot of them are a minute to 2 minutes long. They hit a chorus, the verse, and they're done. Sometimes just a verse, and they're done. The song's gone. I like that. These albums move. So if you have a song you like, dig it, guess what? It's over. You're going to find another song. You might not dig it, but that one will be over soon too. It doesn't wear out its welcome. I can dig that. And then side 2, I always thought it was cool. Gold Star for Robot Boy. If I waited for you to signify the moves I should make, I'd be on the take. Gold Star for Robot Boy, well then that's okay. I think I've always thought that's his, Robert Pollard, the 4th grade teacher song, Like, what am I teaching these kids? Gold Star for Robot Boy. Fuck this. I'm going to go be a rock star. I'm not going to be a 4th grade teacher. That's sort of the anthem. Weird that Robert Pollard writes anthems. He writes indie rock, outsider. This is sort of outsider music, but he writes anthems. And so this is their classic, though. This came out in a deluxe sort of CD version. It's insane that you're never gonna see like remastered Guided by Voices, because why would you? This shit is recorded on old like 4 tracks, multi-dub tapes, But I love this album. I love Alien Lanes, the ones that followed. And if you dare dive into the Robert Pollard catalog, good luck, because you'll find one classic song, and then you'll find 5 pieces of shit, and then you'll find one song that's like the greatest thing you ever heard, and then like 5 songs that are like the worst things you ever heard. These guys will bury like great songs on EPs. I remember, you have to buy like a vinyl EP to get one song you love, and then just hear, some off-key, atonal, made-up on the spot shit. But they're interesting band. I love Guided by Voices, and I still I admire the hell out of them as artists. Unlike Coldplay. Coldplay, go fuck yourself.